Pasteur in Montevideo, and Chris Wood for the National Laboratory for Advanced Microscopy in Mexico. So Leonel, Chris, Andrés, and I work together in Global Bioimaging, who is an international network of imaging infrastructures and communities, which brings together partners around the globe representing their national or regional imaging community. At the moment, we have 11 of them, and we really cover a very nice geographical distribution from the Americas all the way to Australia. And two of these partners are Euro-BioImaging Eric and Latin America, which today meet here to exchange on their own experiences and explore ways to further support each other while building a stronger network in Latin America. So we will hear key insights specific to the bioimaging field, and in particular focusing on community building, infrastructure building, and the political framework and support that needs to be in place to allow bioimaging research to flourish. The structure of the event is the following. We have organized two sections. In the first one, we will have 5 presentations, which I will introduce in a minute. And then I will pass the word to Chris, who will chair the roundtable discussions. And for the roundtable, we will have all the speakers of the previous session. And we've also invited Vladimir Bukasyan from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative as a special guest, who will give us the perspective of a philanthropic organizations that heavily invests in imaging science. I also have a couple of housekeeping notes because the agenda is quite packed. I will have the role to keep time. So each of the speakers, after 10 minutes, they will hear this sound. And they will then know that they have 2 more minutes to wrap up. So as much as possible, please stick to the time so that we can also have a nice discussion. Then we will take a couple of questions. We invite you to put the questions in the chat box. We will try to take 1 or 2 straight after each talk, and then move the rest for discussion in the round table or also for direct answer in the chat. So now let me introduce the first speaker, who is Andrés Kamaid. Andrés is from Uruguay. He's a cell biologist who has been working in research for 15 years in different institutions, both in Uruguay and abroad. He moved to Spain for his PhD in biomedicine, which he obtained from the Universitat Pompeu Fabra de Barcelona, and then covered a series of research positions in the USA, in Mexico, where he was associate professor at the Instituto de Fisiología Celular de la UNAM. Currently, he's a researcher at the Institut Pasteur de Montevideo and dedicates a lot of his time to collaborative projects aiming at building research capacities in microscopy and bioimaging. In fact, he is the principal investigator of the UruMex microscopy project, which is one of the co-organizers of this event, and is heavily involved also in the creation of the Latin America Bioimaging Network. When I asked him for his bio sketch to introduce him today, he shared with me some more personal insight, which I think make a nice introduction to this event, so I'm going to quote him here. He said, "I was born and raised in Uruguay in the 70s, at the time when Uruguay was under a military dictatorship and a scientific career was not an option mentioned at school. I began studying biology at the new Facultad de Ciencias de la Universidad de la República short after the return to democracy. And there I witnessed and benefited from an important time for Europe-Latin America cooperation in science. Prominent exiled scientists were returning to the country, and many were coming from Europe, bringing with them equipment and contacts. International cooperation agencies started funding research projects and some research infrastructures that helped the scientists to rebuild the modern scientific community in Uruguay." So following this positive wind, I pass the word to Andrés for his presentation. Please, Andrés, the floor is yours.
Federica, thank you very much for your introduction and for all your support in this, or in organizing this event. This is great, and you should be acknowledged for that, for all your work. I want to thank everybody for being here today. It's a tremendous pleasure for us to be able to have this kind of meeting, which is, I think, a unique opportunity to discuss important things. As Federica said, this is I try to give a particular introduction in terms of the Europe-Latin America cooperation, which is, as Federica just mentioned, something that I witnessed from the beginning of my career, and I think we have to try to keep maintaining that and fostering that cooperation, which is very helpful for us. And we are now in a different situation in Uruguay than we were at those times, but I think that's even more exciting for us. So I'm very happy. And with that, I will share my screen. And I want to talk to you today very shortly about the Latin American, the perspective from a project that we are developing together with Chris and Leonel, and the perspective from that project on how to build a Latin American bioimaging network. And I would try to summarize briefly a couple of things that I think are important in terms of the discussion that we're going to have later on in it. And I think that discussion is the most important part of this meeting. So I'll try to go first to describe if you're here, it's because you've been in the web page of Latin American Bioimaging, and that's a network we are building, and that network is being built upon the cooperation of many different people in different countries. We are so far have a temporary executive committee that you will soon see in the webpage with all these names. Very important and active people in the bioimaging field from different countries, key persons. I will try to summarize a little bit of the process, how we got to this point. But this is an ongoing process of a network formation. And this is one of the challenges we have, is to certainly establish this network and make it to work for the benefit of all. So just as a previous event, we had in April, the first virtual meeting, and I urge you, for those of you that haven't been there, you can see all the presentations in a YouTube channel that we have. Yeah, and that meeting was intended to bring together all the participants, the main countries that are participating in so far, and to talk about try to get to know each other, where we are in terms of bioimaging infrastructures, and also teaching and research. So it was a very, very helpful event with a very nice amount of people participating. And that was the first encouragement to try to consolidate this initiative. And the thing I wanted to mention, since we are having this in the context of politicians and policymakers, something very important about the process, how we got here, which I think is worth mentioning and discussing. And this, of course, the idea of a network on bioimaging is not new, and there are many people that precede us in this pathway. So, but those initiatives had not been consolidated until we got this funding, which is I think it's a very good example of how governments can help build capacities and can help also not only their national capacities, but in a network logic. So from the very beginning, this was three academic institutions putting together efforts, and the governments of two countries, through the agencies of international cooperation, which I mentioned there, and that they have a common, this is a bilateral international cooperation. But there was, when we set up the goals of the project, we knew that, okay, we want to develop capacities in bioimaging in both countries, and we want to cooperate between the two countries. But from the very beginning, we saw the necessity that in order to build those capacities, we have to work at a regional level. So from the title, you can see we had that in mind, and that was very nicely supported by the funders that they really saw this as a good challenge. I mentioned that our project has many activities. We work in different levels, promoting microscopy at different levels in education, scientific research, cooperation. But this is the people that we've already mentioned, Chris and Lionel. So all what I'm saying is on behalf of the three of us. And just to give you a timeline of the idea of how a project like a bilateral project funded by governments helped build a regional network that I am very sure it will be very important for the region to develop bioimaging research infrastructures. So in 2019, when we started, we had this first contact with global bioimaging, which is, I have to say publicly, that important in all this process to help us from a global perspective to build a regional community. So we started, I put here the main steps in this pathway. So we started getting together with global bioimaging through Chris Wood, which was representing North American bioimaging in this exchange of experiences of global bioimaging. So we got this first approach with them, which later on, July of 2020, Federica we got in touch with Federica to try to see how can we work together to help building this network. So that was very important for us, because from them, we started to put together people who already had been working in this idea of the network, contacting with global bioimaging. And besides those people that global bioimaging already had identified, we had been doing some regional networking, going through important meetings where we met key people that are now in the executive committee, and they were very supportive and happy with the idea of trying to get this network to be established. So we started to participate also we presented this at the global level, and we got a lot of support from the global community, which was very encouraging for us. This is something that is another key advantage of working as a network. We had some results even through this collaboration, working, giving the Latin American perspective. And so we participated in a white paper that GBI published in Nature Methods early this year. So we have Chris, Lionel, and Stefan Hart of Latin American bioimaging giving a good insight from the region here. And besides that, well, these are the other events I mentioned. You know, like we put together a website where we can try to get everybody in the community from Latin America to self-register in there, so we can start to get to know each other, identify ourselves, and start giving shape to this network. We got this event. And in parallel, the other thing that I wanted to mention, which is I think important, is a project like this, on top of working on this building of a regional network, we also helped at the local level in building national capacity, because we had this opportunity through this project to work with policymakers, institutional directors, to try to join efforts. So we were very successful, and thanks to Lionel when he came back to Uruguay, to establish a very strong collaboration at the national level between two big institutions of research here, the University of the Republic and the Institut Pasteur. And we have now a very strong bioimaging unit, which is intended. We also got the support from from Charles Zuckerberg initiative to build a national level bioimaging community, but also with a very strong regional perspective. So this was all, I think, a whole effort with a common vision of developing national capacities, but always working together in a network of regional efforts. So this is all of this. I think it went together very well. So we have a lot of challenges and ahead of us, and I would like to leave time now for the speakers and to talk about those challenges in the panel discussion, which I think are very important. Most of the big challenges we have rely on how to establish and to fund this kind of network and find an agreement with different governments, because this has to be something that involves politicians and policymakers, because this cannot be only, this is not intended to be only an academic network. So with that perspective, I want to thank Federica, Angie, from the Europe side, that they helped us to organize this event very, very nicely. I'm very happy to be with you, and with that, I'll leave you.
Thank you very much, Andrés. I think I see no questions in the chat, so maybe in the interest of time, we can move on and leave the
Sure.
the questions for later. So I